In a rather sad little broadcast, Calvin Robinson has explained, first of all, that he uh, lives in a flat and isn't sure how he's going to pay for that now that he is no longer employed by GB News. He literally has no income. Uh, but he also pointed out that he was one of the founder members of GB News. It's been a passion project of his and Dan Wooten's, and he thought that Lawrence Fox had behaved foolishly, but that it should have merited little more than a slap on the wrist and an apology. I I beg to differ, but he also thinks it's harder for GB News to fire Dan Wooten because he's on a permanent contract, whereas on a much longer permanent contract, whereas he and Lawrence Fox were on much more tenuous contracts. I don't fully understand what the difference would be. I suspect it's something to do with how long they've been employed. But anyway, he suggests the key to the little broadcast is that he suggests that there's a civil war going on in GB News, and it's the result of one of the management trying to buy up the Telegraph, and that means that GB News must avoid being edgy, must avoid being the source of controversy. I think it already is, so I don't think there's much that can be done to hide that. And GB News, he thinks, is the place, the testing ground of the new conservatism. He goes on. He details many allegations. One of which is that a former newscaster on GB News left with a 5-figure payout because she had been abused by a member of the management, by the management team. He doesn't say who that person was, but it is a shocking revelation, and I'm quite astonished that he has said that, because it narrows the field of who it could possibly be, and it makes one wonder, what other skeletons are in the closets of the GB News team. I still think GB News is an interesting project, and one that I wish would become a little bit more mainstream. If it were, I would be very happy to contribute to it. But in its present form, I would be very cautious. I was asked to be part of GB News right at the beginning, before it had even launched. I went in. I did a stint in front of green screen cameras, and it was very interesting. It seemed a bit chaotic, but all new ventures are slightly chaotic, and I thought that it was an interesting approach, though I was cautious about its avowed direction, and I was extremely worried by the Andrew Neil departure. I think now it's in a position where it needs to be frankly rescued, and rescued by people who perhaps are slightly more towards the centre than the far right. And there is room for negotiation, I think, and there is room for some sort of salvage. But without that, GB News will fail, because I don't think there's any room in the British heart for a TV station which courts nastiness so readily. I think talk TV is well on the way out, and that's partly because it's focused on getting people like Nadine Dorries, people whose competence is in question, and either you can do it or you can't do it. Calvin Robinson is actually a very good broadcaster. Again, I don't like his views particularly, but I think he's a good broadcaster. He comes across as very committed and as very principled, and as very focused. And I think when balanced with somebody with slightly different views, it would be an astonishing combination. But I don't think that's what GBNews provided for him. So I'm sorry about his revelations. I'm sorry about what's happened to him. I'm sorry what's happened to Lawrence Fox. I'm sorry what's happened to Ava Evans. And there we are. That's the revelations about GBNews.